Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Attention students. As you know, it's a new school year, and dressing smart is of the utmost importance. So will all students please report to Old Navy immediately in order to get your wardrobe on flick, or flack, or whatever you kids are saying these days. Class is dismissed.
Run to Old Navy tomorrow for your back-to-school shopping. All kids' stuff is on sale up to 60% off, with jeans from $8 and tees from $4. That's right, all kids' stuff is up to 60% off, even uniforms. Valid 7/24 through 8/12. Select styles only. Excludes gift cards and clearance.
Deborah Harry has become the first one to solo album.
My baby has problems. I think it's quite unique. She saves lots of money, not brushing all her feet. But I never buy her makeup or lipstick that is red. She looks so good without it. Plus my baby's got no hair, got no head, no head, got no head, no head, got no head, no head, got no head, no head.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. My name is Nick Ficcarelli. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports, where the beacons are lit, the experiments are on the chalkboard, and the test subjects, as always, they come rolling in. And as always, with me is my number one apprentice. Ladies and gentlemen, he's affectionately known as Stat Boy to many in the sports world, but I only know him as one person, Dr. Andrew Glukov.
Nick, it's great to be here, ready for duty.
And before we get started with our first guest, just have a little announcement that I'd like to share with everybody. Earlier this week, I got a phone call from Lowell Waterfan, and he said that he's going to have some news that he wants to share come Thursday or Friday of this week. And I asked him what it was about. He goes, "Don't worry, you'll see," which was kind of sort of cryptic, but I was like, all right, well, we'll see what happens. Well, sure enough, I got the email, and it was posted on social media, that this little show that I started a few months ago has been nominated for the Online Media Podcast of the Year Award at Waterfan, in which the winner will be announced at their sports conference on Saturday, September 6th in Orlando, Florida. The nominations, shockingly enough, were from last year's winners at Sports Infusion, Pamela Michelle and Andrew Fish fame. They went out of their way, spoke to Lowell, and nominated me, and the nomination was accepted. To say right now, I am very humbled and very honored to be nominated in such a place. It's beyond my wildest dreams, and I got to tell you, I'm still in shock. I do this because I want to do this. I do this because I feel, I want to be a voice for the fan, and I feel that, I don't want to listen to a bunch of crock on some major networks and stuff like that, where if you try to voice an opinion, you get cut off after 5 seconds. So I decided a few years ago to do this, to sub for a friend of mine on a radio show. It pretty much morphed into a network. A couple of networks later, I'm here, and it's finally come to fruition. Andrew's been with me, through the beginning when we were doing TSC Saturday night. He was part of the, part of the triumvirate, as I would say, of me, him, and our good friend Kyle Nash, who's now at NCSC Sports. And who would have thought that a show like this would be nominated for an award? And I'm still beyond shocked about it. But, Drew, I think the hard work is finally starting to pay off.
It's been a wild ride. I remember starting with you on the old – in fact, let's go further back. Let's call it the Sports Chronicles Radio Network Show, which was the original name, back in November of 2012 is when I started working with you on that with Kyle. and then it was eventually just you and I for a good while. This has been a wild, wild run, and I'm thrilled to be back working with you again as we've been for a little while. You've earned this. You've worked your tail off building a network from scratch, and then coming over here to the Inscriber Network and building this one up essentially from scratch, pulling in talent, putting shows together. This is an incredible accomplishment, Nick, and I'm thrilled to be along for the ride with you.
I really do appreciate that. And, well, enough about this show. It's all about the fans. It's all about the guests that we have here. It's all about having a good time. Our first guest happens to be joining us now. He's part of TSN. He's been on Fox Sports News. He's been a guest on ESPN. He's been a guest on Yahoo. He's been a guest on NBC. He's been a guest everywhere. And his knowledge of the NFL is pretty much second to none. And to have him on our show is greatly appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Mr. John McMullen. John, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, guys. I hope I don't screw this up for you, the award.
Trust me, it takes a lot to screw up this show, which means you happen to do on a weekly basis. But we always have a lot of fun. We always have a lot of fun with it. So, John, what do you call? Thank you for joining us this evening. Let's get the ball rolling right off the bat, and we'll start with the topic that just never seems to go away, and it's pretty much making me nauseous, being Deflategate. We all thought that a decision would finally be coming down because Goodell was making it sound like it will be swift, it will be just, it will be everything. But it seems that, he's now taking his sweet-ass time. We understood that there was an offer on the table from Tom Brady's legal team for some sort of settlement so it doesn't go to court. Goodell is still weighing his options, and everybody's like, just get it over with already. Have you heard anything yet regarding a decision, and what's your opinion on this? Because I got to be honest with you, it's got to be done already.
Yeah, I mean, it's a self-inflicted wound as far as the NFL is concerned. The holdup, it's not about, Roger Goodell making the decision. He's already made a decision. The holdup is really from the other end in that, the NFL is willing to come down as far as the penalty goes. Whether that ends up being 2 games or 1 game, that's what is taking so long. They're trying to, use some backdoor negotiation, try to get Tom Brady to agree with that and hopefully move on from this finally. But he's been steadfast that he wants to fight it, and he will not accept anything outside of a fine, which he's agreed to, and that's pretty much what the Players Association has informed the NFL. And if that's the case, it's going to federal court, and then it becomes a matter of getting a stay, which would enable him to play week 1 of the season. And most likely, from the history of cases like this, most likely would allow him to play this year, sort of kick the can down the road. I don't like his chances, and I'm talking about Brady in federal court. I think eventually he would lose, and eventually he would have to serve some kind of penalty, most likely 2 games. But that would come down, as I said, down the road.
Now, do you feel that Goodell is in pretty much between a rock and a hard place? Because if he keeps the suspension at, say, at 4 games, which has been the most talked about thing, he's going to be taken to court. If he reduces the suspension to 2 games or possibly only even 1 game, everybody will think, Bob Kraft has him in the back pocket. The situation for him is so hairy right now. Do you think this is just pretty much lose-lose for him?
At this point, everything's lose-lose for him because he lacks credibility. And I've written about that numerous times in the past, mainly going back to the personal conduct issues. And that's a problem the owners have to deal with. To this point, they've stuck behind him. They pretty much looked at the bottom line in the league as far as the financial aspect goes, and have kind of overlooked sort of his, travails, which always seem to be under scrutiny in these types of issues. It's a public relations nightmare. But as long as he's making that league money, it's pretty clear the 32 owners are not going to abandon him. So at the end of the day, he still has incredible power. It's just that he doesn't have any credibility with the general public. But let me just say this as far as the Brady and Deflate go. People have to understand, and I know this is tough for casual fans, this is not the same as some of the other cases that the NFL has lost, most notably Adrian Peterson. If Greg Hardy decides to take his penalty to court, I believe he will win. But those issues are different, and specifically because the league unilaterally, without collectively bargaining, put this new domestic violence policy in. And I put that quotations new in quotation because I said that was not bargain. That was just the NFL saying this is the way it's going to be. That's why Peterson was able to get that victory. In this case with, Tom Brady, there's no precedent really. Roger Goodell collectively bargained this power. He has it. In the past, I always use the Star Caps case, if you guys remember that, where Kevin Williams, Pat Williams, Deuce McAllister, players like that were suspended for a banned diuretic. That was a perfect example because the court it loathed the way the NFL acted in that case. But at the end of the day, they won because the players collectively bargained it, and federal courts will not overturn collectively bargained agreements because it opens up a whole can of worms that goes far beyond football, and that's what Tom Brady faces and why he's not going to win in court.
Now, Drew, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, the thing that caught me is, and I'm wondering if there's really smoke to this, because we know sometimes stories get fed to try to create a narrative. What owners do you think are the influential owners that are pushing for no reduction in the suspension?
Well, everyone jokes it's the first 4 games, but to me that stems to the lack of credibility that I talked about with Roger Goodell, and the fact that some owners want him to stand pat for that particular reason, and the fact that you mentioned his prior relationship with Robert Kraft. If he knocks things down to even 2 or 1 games, there's going to be criticism because of that. He absolutely cannot knock it down to 0 games because this is a league that spent $5 million on deflated footballs and put together the Wells Report, which is 243 pages. So you can't just go up and say, we wasted all this time and wasted all this money. I always describe it as this. The NFL turned a misdemeanor into a felony. They turned something that, I'm not going to say everybody did it, but there are far more people in this league than Tom Brady that have, doctored footballs. You have Brad Johnson, who admits on the biggest stage of them all, the Super Bowl, he paid the ball boys off to get the balls exactly the way that he wanted them. Freely admits it. So that's the kind of tack that Brady is upset about. He's saying, why are you pointing at me and singling me out? And to be honest, I don't have an answer for that. I have no idea why the NFL made this into this gargantuan story. And quite frankly, I'm shaking my head over it almost every day.
At this point, they're pot committed. I want, since we're talking about, we talked about the domestic violence, and some of the questionable rulings. What happened yesterday with the New Orleans Saints releasing Junior Galette, I found this to be kind of a shocker. Kind of surprising, but this goes back to the domestic issues that he was facing that were ultimately dropped. Do you think that the Saints are out of line with this?
I don't know if they're out of line. I mean, that's the world we're living in. I mean, when that video surfaced, his days were numbered in New Orleans. Interesting enough, that's just the way the news cycle goes today, and you can agree with it or not. I happen to not agree with it. That's not in any way defending Junior Gillette, but people are so scared of the potential blowback in situations like this that they want to cut bait immediately. And generally, it happens with lesser players. If you're third man on the roster and you do something wrong, well, they're just going to cut you. Obviously, if you're a star player, the rules don't necessarily apply. In this particular case, you have a very, very productive player who can rush the passer, and I certainly think we'll get a second chance somewhere. But that's one of those issues. Same thing you see with Greg Hardy. Well, Carolina had to move on from him, but Dallas was willing to sign him because he's still a very good, very productive player. He needs a change of scenery because of the environment we're in, and he's going to get it, and he's going to get another chance. But that's up to people and, their moral judgments, whether they like it or not. The court, to me, everything should come down to that. Basically, you should let the legal process play itself out. It's not perfect, but it's better than anything else we have, and move forward from there. But unfortunately, in this 24/7 news cycle we have now, everybody jumps to conclusions. They don't want to wait. They want to make rash decisions immediately. Not necessarily good, but that's just the world we live in.
All right, I want to change gears a little bit by keeping it within the controversial realm of the NFL. Let's talk about Junior Seau and the Hall of Fame speech coming up. This one really gave it a lot of negative press. Junior's daughter not able to have a speech at Junior's induction next week, the next Saturday, the 8th. What's your take on this? I know there's a policy already in place, and it was kicked in 4 years ago, that the posthumous induction does not have a speech with it that can be presented. Do you think this is that completely asinine, or do you think there's good reason why this policy is in place?
I don't think it's either, really. I don't think it's asinine, and I don't think there's a good reason the policy's in place. I mean, there's not really a problem to me. I mean, I've been to a lot of Hall of Fame inductions over the years, and to me, there's, everyone deserves a speech, whether it's, whether they're with us or they're not. So that part of it I don't like, but, it's not the NFL's fault, certainly. I know a lot of people spun that. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is not run by the National Football League. Now, that's not to say they can't exert some influence. But, this conspiracy theory that because of the way he died and the concussion issue that the NFL somehow tried to derail people from speaking about that, I don't believe that to be the case at all. And I know that's not, and believe me, people on Park Avenue are not necessarily always thrilled with the things I write, because I've been very critical of the league throughout a lot of these personal conduct issues. But in this case, it's just not, that theory is just not, it doesn't hold water. Again, it's not the National Football League Hall of Fame, it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the people who run it have always been pretty independent, and as you mentioned, this policy has been in place for a number of years. The fact that it just comes up because of these controversial circumstances. You can argue the policy's bad. I have no issue with that, but it certainly has nothing to do with the NFL or the concussion issue.
Now, going to change some gears again. Obviously, there was a fan vote taken this week, and sure enough, the Philadelphia Eagles fans were voted as the worst fans in the NFL. Now, I've been to Philadelphia games. I live about an hour out of Philadelphia, although I am a Minnesota Viking fan. And I have to say, Philadelphia fans are extremely passionate about their team. And, the rivalry that they've had with the Redskins, the Giants, the Cowboys, is beyond reproach. But to call them the worst fans in the NFL or the nastiest fans in the NFL, to be honest with you, I think it's just a little bit overboard. I mean, I guess they're still trying to live down the rep of booing Santa Claus from 40 years ago and, snowballs back like 30 years ago and stuff like that, back when they were at the vet and everything. But do you think Philadelphia fans are getting a bum rap, or do you think, do you think there should even be votes like this? Because I can name other fan bases which I think are just as bad or maybe even worse.
Well, you take it for what it is. I mean, obviously, if you're doing a study on fan bases, it's not, going to be in Scientific America. So it's not, a plus or minus 3 points. It's not a great poll. It's just, somebody's opinion on a particular day. I live, in South Jersey. I live just outside of Philadelphia. The Eagles fans are what they are. They're tremendously passionate. They'll wear that as a badge of honor. I think part of it's the East Coast thing. There's no question, but you can go up and down the I-95 corridor. You can talk about the Patriots fans, the Jets fans, Giants fans, all the way down to the Redskins. There's a little more. There's no question there's a little more, whatever you want to call it, teeth to the fan base, a little tougher, both on their teams themselves and both on how they treat visiting fans. But, if you want to call them worse, I don't know. You would have to define that for me. I think, as I said, I think the East Coast has a little bit on Raiders fans and Cleveland Browns and the dog pound back in the day. And there's been a lot of nasty fan bases that try to make the opposition uncomfortable, and Philadelphia's always been at the top of that list. I think they always will be, but I think that's just an East Coast thing more than anything else.
Nick, you forget something. 2 words. It's not baseball related, but 2 words. D-batteries. That's why they'll always be at the top of that list.
True.
Yeah, I mean, you can always point out individual things. There's always horrible stories. They've cleaned it up a lot since the change from Veterans Stadium to the Lincoln Financial Field, but there's been high-profile stories all around. You talk about the Dodgers-Giants rivalry in baseball, where there was somebody killed, and you can do that. You can pick and choose individual acts from fan bases throughout the country. It doesn't necessarily paint everyone. It is what it is, and as I said, it's not very scientific. It's just, as we call in the industry, mostly it's just clickbait. People like to see it, and obviously Philadelphia has a reputation, and I don't think it's changing anytime soon.
Now, last question before we let you go tonight. Training camp, obviously, coming right around the bend. Adrian Peterson today got a standing ovation from the fans as he walked into training camp after all the back and forth that happened this offseason. Cooler heads pretty much had prevailed. Cooler heads pretty much had prevailed. It's interesting how that happened. I know. I would trust me. I'm still in shock that Adrian Peterson is still in a Viking uniform after all that was said and done during the offseason, in which Ben Dogger went nuclear on the Vikings, and the Vikings pretty much were like, well, you had 2 options, either play or retire because we're not releasing you after contract. Painted Dogger into the corner, and Peterson was like, you know what, I'll do what needs to be done. I'll play out the contract, and apparently, once again, cooler heads prevailed. You had cooler heads prevail in Dallas with Des Bryant. You had cooler heads prevail with Demaryius Thomas, with both of them getting practically the same exact contract and the same exact signing bonus. Is there any specific training camp battle that you are going to be focusing on, being that you do write for TSN? And if so, what do you think may happen during training camp?
Well, the most interesting to me are the Vikings because Adrian Peterson returns. A lot of people think they're a sexy team that could be on the verge of making a push toward the playoffs. with him back behind Teddy Bridgewater if he's the real deal. And, you know, a lot of it was overblown with Peterson and the Vikings. It basically surrounded one person, that was Kevin Warren, who was the chief legal counsel and was promoted to COO. Adrian kind of thinks he threw him under the bus during this issue, but, you know, Peterson has to take responsibility for his own actions. The Vikings really didn't have any other choice. But as a whole, in the football sense, he likes Mike Zimmer. He likes what the team, he thinks this is the best team they've had since basically when they went to the NFC Championship game with Brett Favre. But to me, they're the most interesting story because I think Bridgewater's the real deal, and the other is Philadelphia because of Chip Kelly and how many changes he's made. If you think about the NFL, it's always about continuity, and he has gone opposite of that. So many changes, walking away from players like Deshaun Jackson, Shady McCoy, Jeremy Maclin, and trading Nick Foles for Sam Bradford, which doesn't make sense on so many levels. Not only the fact that Nick Foles is 14-4 as a starter with the Eagles, but he was scheduled to make less than $1 million. Sam Bradford's going to make just under $13 million, and he's coming off 2 ACLs over a 20-month. That is very, very interesting, and if it doesn't work, if Sam Bradford's not healthy, if he doesn't play well, this could be the beginning of the end for Chip Kelly.
Nick, what really happened? What really happened with the Vikings wasn't that cooler heads prevailed. I don't know if you're Catholic, but there had to be dozens of Hail Marys said and divine intervention, and all of a sudden things are like they never went wrong. It's like, because I know you are beyond thrilled that your team still has AP.
Yeah, and as I said, it had more to do with Kevin Warren than anything else. He likes Mike Zimmer, he likes Rick Spielman, and he likes, you know, the thought of playing behind Teddy Bridgewater. And interesting, you know, I think Adrian is what he is. You know, he might be the best pure runner since Barry Sanders. You could argue Jim Brown. He can go back that far. He's going to rush for 1,600 yards if he's healthy. To me, it all comes down to Bridgewater, and this is the kind of thing we don't know. He looked like the real deal to me, but with young players, you have to see. You have to wait in that off season because that's when we don't get to see them. That's when we don't know what they're doing. And the truly great quarterbacks in this league, they might do it in different ways, but they all have one thing in common, and that's work ethic, and that's just being a sort of a gym rat in football terms as far as, you know, film study and things like that. All the indications are Teddy Bridgewater has embraced things like that, and he's going to be on the right direction. But until you see it, you know, you have to temper that.
Well, John, I want to say thank you so much for joining us this evening here in the lab. Why don't you let the good people know out there where they can find you on social media and tell them all about TSN?
You can find me on Twitter at JF, as in Frank McMullen. My last name, McMullen, and you can find my syndicated column, which is, you know, all over the country, Los Angeles Times, Miami Herald, Charlotte Observer. You can find it first at sportsnetwork.com and also fanracksports.com.
Well, I just got to say thank you very much for joining us this evening, John. Hope you have a great rest of the summer and definitely have you on during football season.
All right, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, have a good one.
Have a great night.
And that was John McMullen, syndicated journalist for the NFL with the Sports Network, TSN, as you heard, Los Angeles Times, Charlotte Observer. So I got to tell you, Drew, though, when Peterson got the standing ovation today, I was going into camp and people saying, "Welcome back, AP. We love you, AP." At first I was like, yeah, what do you call it? They say that now, but, what happens if he struggles at the beginning of the season, just like any football fan may do and everything. But I need to remind people of something, I should say. This is the same guy that had a blown-out knee, was out for a full season, came back, and was 6 yards away from breaking the all-time single-season rushing record. Fast forward a couple of years later. He misses a full season due to what happened, with his son, and that's another year in which your body completely recuperates. John said 1,500 to 1,600 yards. I got that sneaking suspicion that it's going to happen again. We may see another 2,000-yard season, especially if Teddy Bridgewater and the rest of the offense, plays up to its potential.
I disagree with you, Nick. If Teddy Bridgewater and the rest of the offense plays up to potential, they won't need Adrian Peterson to run for 2,000 yards, so he won't. They won't give him the ball as much. If the offense is efficient, they won't need to tap into him quite as much. I think 1,700 yards is very realistic. I don't think he's going to need to hit 2,000. You're not dealing with Tavares Jackson as your quarterback. You actually have a capable quarterback in the backfield. I'm a big fan of Bridgewater. I liked him back in college. I liked him in college. I liked him in the pros. I think he's the real deal.
Please do not ever say that name again. In Tavares Jackson, one of the worst draft picks we ever had in a long time. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now from football to baseball. And joining us with us now in the lab is none other than a man that really needs no introduction, because when you write for Baseball Prospectus, you know you've reached the promised land. He's one of the best and the brightest in the fantasy baseball business. Actually, he's just one of the best and the brightest when it comes to Major League Baseball. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Gianella is now in the lab. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good. It's a lot to live up to. I'm a little sheepish after the introduction, but thanks.
Well, what do you call it? It's the way that everything goes here in the lab and everything like that. But we're going to get things started with obviously the big news this weekend being the Baseball Hall of Fame. Inductions are scheduled for tomorrow with a class that is pretty much beyond reproach. I mean, the star power going in this year, is like second to none. Hasn't been something like this in a few years. We have Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, Craig Biggio, and John Smoltz going in. This is one of the, like I said, star-studded across the board. Tell me about any memories that you have, not only as a writer but also as a baseball fan, growing up watching these guys, and what really stood out for each player.
Well, Biggio, I remember he came up as a catcher, and he was just one of those players when they moved him to second base, you kind of wondered how much the bat would translate, and he was just consistent. And, I always thought he'd be good, but he just kind of, you hear about grinders or guys who, kind of play above their level. I thought he'd be a very good player. I didn't think he would be, a guy to get 3,000 hits and last as long as he did. And he had some power for a while there, too. He's just one of those players who, definitely went past what you would have expected. Randy Johnson was someone, when he started out, he was a little bit like Koufax in that, very wild. He didn't know if he would necessarily make it, and it took him a while to kind of, forget to get to the pinnacle that he got to. It took him a while to be a viable major league pitcher, but when he got there, he was so, not just good, it was just so crazy to watch him. You remember, he was like, 6'10", whatever height he was, throwing the ball, coming toward the mound. The memory I have is the All-Star game where, John Kruk came up with the bat upside down and, it was like kind of pretending to hit him. You hear the term feared and it's kind of thrown around too much, but Randy Johnson was feared. And then you had Pedro, and, Pedro to me, with all due respect to anyone I've watched pitch, and that includes like Greg Maddux, he is the best pitcher I've ever seen pitch. He threw 4 pitches for strikes. His velocity was never super high. I don't want to undersell it. He still threw hard, but it was the combination of location. He knew where the ball was going. He was just somebody when he was on, and he's putting up sub-2 ERAs in an era when the league average ERA was a little bit over 4. Which, with all due respect to guys like Kershaw today, they're doing it in an era where pitching is more dominant, the strike zones are perhaps a little wider, and, perhaps, steroids are less prevalent. John Smoltz kind of kills me because I'm a Mets fan, and, he's one of the big three, along with Glavine and Maddux, who just killed us. And, solid pitcher, made the transition to closer. Just one of those guys who I think similar to Biggio, maybe while we were watching him, we didn't recognize how great he was. But then when you look back at his career, you look back at him and you're like, wow, I mean, he was really an amazing pitcher. And you wonder if he didn't get hurt and have to transition to closer, if his final numbers would have been a little bit better.
Well, being that I'm, a huge baseball fan and stuff like that, when this Hall of Fame class came out, I mean, the memories that I have are, very, varied, because I remember when it comes to Pedro Martinez, the one game that will always stand out to me was there were two. First was Game 5 against the Cleveland Indians, when he came on after they were getting blown out, and he threw 6 innings of no-hit ball on 3 days rest to help the Red Sox advance in the playoffs that season. And then, of course, who could ever forget the ESPN game when it was him and Roger Clemens in one of the greatest pitching duels I've seen in quite some time.
I was actually at that game.
It was one. I mean, You were on, as you just see, watching two masters of the game going at it. Pedro prevailing. I believe the final score was 1-0, and it was a solo home run that that won the game for the Red Sox. It was Trot Nixon, I believe.
Yep, and what I remember about that game was I think Clemens actually had the better stuff. He struck out more guys. Pedro, I mean, he certainly had good stuff, but he didn't have his best stuff that night. And it's funny because the manager came out in the ninth inning to pull him, and he kind of shook him off. He's like, "No, I'm going to finish this," and he did. And I had really good seats too. I was like off first base. I wasn't like in the first row, but I was like on the lower level, and I was close enough to kind of see everything that happened. And it's just kind of an example of a pitcher who. The guy facing was Roger Clemens, and Clemens, I thought, looked better. He made a mistake to Nixon, otherwise he shut him down. Pedro kind of gritted his way through it, and once Nixon got him the home run, he wasn't going to lose that game. And for me, for Randy Johnson, obviously, watching him grow from when he was with the Expos, he was a feared pitcher, but he was feared because he was wild, and then for him to pretty much become the most dominant lefty since Sandy Koufax in the 1960s. And when Craig Biggio, grinder, played the game the right way, was one of the very, very few that you could say played with the same team throughout his whole career, didn't get the respect I think that he deserved, especially the year before, not this year, but last year, when he missed out by literally 2 votes, I think it was, to get into the Hall of Fame, when I personally thought it was going to be first ballot. And then, of course, John Smoltz. You talk about what might have been, with the injuries and stuff like that, but John Smoltz was our generation's Dennis Eckersley. Smoltz was a dominant starter, became a dominant closer, then went back to being a starter again, and we could play the numbers game. What happened if you were a closer, throughout his whole career? What happened if he was a starter throughout his whole career? But for him to go from one extreme to the other and back, pretty much like proved his worth playing for the, especially playing for the Atlanta Braves. And I am going to watch the induction tomorrow, and I'm going to have a smile on my face because I can actually say I watched all 4 of these guys play throughout their careers, and it was an honor to do so. Not only as someone that covers stuff on radio, but also as a baseball fan. Well, we really just you made this point at the beginning of the segment. We really run through an amazing period of players who just were some elites, some all-time greats. And the previous class had, Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, and Frank Thomas, and we're going to see Ken Griffey get in there shortly, and some of these other guys, putting aside like Bonds and Clemens, Mike Piazza, I think, is going to get in at some point, Jeff Bagwell. We're really, it's just reminders of, if you watch baseball in the 90s in particular, you were really blessed to see some of the all-time greats who played the game, without a doubt.
Well, next year, I believe Griffey comes on, so you know he's going to make it. I mean, he should be first ballot, no problem. I really feel that
I'd be shocked if he didn't get in first ballot, yeah.
I really do feel that Piazza is going to make it next year. And, you know, there are a couple other guys that have been gaining, momentum in the votes, but don't know if they're going to make it, don't know if they're going to make it or not. But I can pretty much say that next year we're definitely going to have more guys from our generation to make it. And it's going to be, it'll be interesting. The Hall of Fame vote is always going to be interesting and stuff like that. Going to be moving on now to the trading deadline, and this is where, before we get to the trading deadline, I'm sorry, but I wanted to hear from Andrew and see if he had any thoughts on this Hall of Fame class before he takes over with regards to trading deadline talk.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like you, Nick. It stung me when Biggio was just outside looking in. With Barry Bonds getting the acquittal, getting dismissed, all the charges against him, do you think the Hall of Famers are going to start to look at him slightly different?
I'm sorry, are you asking me or Nick?
I'll start with this. I'll start with this, and then Mike, you can chime in. But I'm going to say this: when the Justice Department came out this week and said that they were not going to continue with their court battle after the Ninth Circuit, reversed the conviction, it was very quietly done. It was like a one-paragraph thing. And I said that one paragraph can go a very long way now. Will he make the Hall of Fame? I got to say maybe. I can't say yes, and the reason why is because the stigma is going to be there with the voters for a very, very long time.
My thought on it, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you weren't done. Go ahead.
Now, I just don't know what the writers are going to do. I think he has a better chance with the Veterans Committee. Me saying that is actually shocking, but I think he has a better chance with the Veterans Committee in 10 years. Because in the Veterans Committee in 10 years, all the hardcore old-timers will be gone. And it's going to be people from our generation. And before all this stuff came out and everything like that, and we saw Barry Bonds go from stick figure to pretty much this big, gigantic behemoth, I think he has a better chance there than he does with the writers. Go ahead, Mike.
Here's what I think. I think that there's, we kind of see this. If you read Ken Rosenthal's excellent Hall of Fame piece every year, he's still no on Bonds, but he's one of the thoughtful voters who says, I might change my mind. Right now I can't, and he outlines his reasons, which I won't go into because it's too long. I believe there's a contingent of voters who will vote for the PED guys. There's a contingent on the fence, but there's also a large enough contingent, and I think it's over that 25% in the know, that are never going to change their mind, that are always going to say that there's no way that I will ever vote for Bonds or Clemens or for a player, that I believe did PEDs, and it's, not even a Bagwell or a Piazza where, it's just nothing but circumstantial, and you have those voters. But I think with Bonds and Clemens, there's enough evidence there that they did it in the minds of these writers that it isn't a legal argument. It's just the argument, I think they did it. I'm never going to vote for them. What I think is going to happen, Veterans Committee or no, I believe at some point there's probably going to be a separate panel outside of the Veterans Committee that kind of looks at these guys and makes decisions. What I've said all along, it's funny, Nate Silver had an article today which I kind of disagreed with the premise, but I like the idea for the Hall of Fame, and it's the idea that if you take a third of these guys' stats away, are they still Hall of Famers? So now, someone like Mark McGwire or Rafael Palmeiro who failed the test, the answer is no. But someone like Bonds or Clemens, and this is where this is all absurd, sure they're Hall of Famers. If you take out the time that they, allegedly or purportedly did PEDs, they're still above the threshold. They're not inner circle guys, but they're still above the threshold of what a Hall of Famer is. So I really think at some point in 15, 20 years down the line, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a committee that looks at these guys and kind of makes decisions on a case-by-case basis.
All right, let's change gears to the trade deadline, and we're already getting very close to it. We've already seen a couple of trades go down. Obviously, Houston's looking like a big winner right now with that Scott Kazmir trade coming in and immediately throwing some heat. You look at the teams that are around 500 and a few games down. Tampa, well, in the American League, Tampa, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Texas, and even Seattle. All of them are still in shooting distance of the wild card. Which of these teams do you think are going to be buyers, and which ones do you think are going to be sellers?
Well, what I suspect is, from what I'm seeing, I don't know how many of these teams are going to buy or sell. I get the impression that the teams on the cusp, like I'm looking at the wild card standings right now. So if the season ended today, you've got the Astros and the Twins as the wild card. Yeah, Tampa's 4 out, Detroit's 4 out, Baltimore's 4.5 out, Texas is 5 out. I get the impression a lot of these teams have their toe in the water with selling, with the exception of the Blue Jays, who I think are going to try to buy. The rest of these teams, I think, are looking at that second wild card and, quite honestly, at the strength of the top 3 teams in the American League, and they don't seem to, based on the rumors at least, they don't really seem to be committed to selling. The Tigers, the Orioles, and the Rangers all have been tied to selling as opposed to buying. So really, at one point people were talking about it being a seller's market, but now it looks like the opposite. Like it's going to kind of go the other way and be. I'm sorry, I meant the other way. People were saying it's going to be a buyer's market. I think it could be the opposite. So
with the glut of selling teams, it may drop down the asking price for a player then.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. Although, as we've seen, there's 2 things to consider. There's a player like David Price or a player like Johnny Cueto is a better example because he'll probably get traded. Obviously you have to trade enough so that if he gets a qualifying offer, the Reds will get a first-round pick. So whatever gets offered has to be better than that first-round pick. So you're probably looking at 2 quality prospects for Cueto, even if they're not top-tier guys. Someone like Cole Hamels is really complicated, and we've heard this now for God knows how long. The Phillies look at Hamels like, well, look, he's going to be cheaper than the guys in the free agent pool, and he's not going to, and he's an ace, even if he's not a Zach Greinke ace, he's the next level down. So we don't just want to give him away. And other teams and the teams looking at him are like, well, we understand that, but we don't want to trade you 2 or 3 top prospects for him. Because we have the money, like the Dodgers are a good example. It's like, well, we get it. Cole Hamels is good, but we have the money to sign an ace, whether it's Greinke or Price or Cueto, without giving up our prospects. So I think there's a lot of dynamics at work. It is interesting you start with the American League because a lot of those teams, in a sense, are close to that second wild card, so you think they should be buyers, but all the rumors right now are pointing to them either standing pat or selling, again, with the exception of the Blue Jays.
Okay, so you talk about Cole Hamels, and he throws the no-hitter today and
right.
Looks solid doing it. And I absolutely thought it was hysterical the way the Chicago Cubs Twitter handled it, but that's besides the point. Who do you think is going to be making a strong play for Cole Hamels?
Well, the teams that have been tied to him, the 4 teams, are the Dodgers, the Rangers, which is kind of interesting because I just talked about them otherwise being a seller. The Red Sox, which is also interesting, and the Cubs. So, what you're kind of looking at, the Cubs and the Dodgers are obvious. And the Dodgers are, first in their division. They're pretty hungry for a win. They keep getting bounced in the playoffs, usually by the Cardinals. I think they're looking at a Hamels, Greinke, Kershaw combination as something to be really hard to beat. The Cubs are looking for the pitching, although it's kind of funny because their hitting right now is where they're really struggling. And the Rangers and Red Sox, and especially the Red Sox, are teams, I think, looking at what I'm talking about with Hamels, which is we're not just looking at this year, we're looking at the next 3 years. We think we can bounce back, even if it doesn't happen for us this year, and we have the prospects. What's really interesting about the Cubs to me is that the Cubs are the one team I think that could trade for Hamels in the sense that they have an excess of all these hitting prospects that whether it's Javi Baez or Arismendi Alcantara, guys who could play in the majors now for a lot of teams, they just don't have the space for, or would be backups, and get a Hamels. And that's kind of where, the argument for other teams is, well, we don't want to give up our top guys. For the Cubs, it's kind of like, well, there's no reason for them not to give up one or two of those guys in a trade like that if they're just going to sit on the bench or be in the platoon.
Okay. I'm originally from Cleveland, so I'm still a Tribe fan. I live down in the Tampa area, so I root for the Rays as well. Is there no team that wins the PR line as far as from the trade deadline than the Cleveland Indians and their handling of Mike Aviles?
Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, the thing about that is that Aviles, I mean, as a trade chip, probably wouldn't have had a lot of value in any event. But, yeah, so it's obviously the right thing to do that they're not going to move him.
All right, I got one more before I'll kick it to Nick so he can wrap up his questions on the trade deadline. We talked about the American League. Obviously, the National League is a little bit more spread out. You talked about the Cubs making a play for Hamels. With them being so close, who are the other players that the Cubs are looking to make a strong push for? Because they're only a game and a half out.
Well, it's a lot of that depends. This is always the case with these rumors. A lot of it depends on who you listen to and what you believe. They've been linked to David Price, but going back to what we talked about with the AL before, the Tigers are close enough that unless they're bowled over, I think they're going to try to make one last push for that second wild card. There's still a ways to go. The possibility I saw tonight was kind of the second-tier targets where you get a Mike Leake who's a solid ad as opposed to somebody who's a top-flight guy, and a Will Venable, someone the Mets have also been linked to. And it's kind of the same situation. Venable, he wouldn't necessarily play every day, but it would give him some flexibility. On the offensive side, which is where the Cubs need more help, and I look at this with the Mets trade. Some people criticize the Mets trade, but if you look at the offensive market, it's kind of like, well, outside of Justin Upton, assuming he's going to go for sale, who's definitively out there? Jay Bruce has been mentioned, but he's under contract for a couple more years, and the Reds might not move him for that reason. And the best guy who might definitively move is Ben Zobrist. I like Ben Zobrist, but this is kind of the problem that teams, particularly teams looking for offense, have. And the Cubs need offense. There's no doubt about it. Everyone talks about how bad the Mets are and how bad the Phillies and the White Sox are. The Cubs, I think, are sixth or seventh from the bottom on offense. It's not really an offense in the playoffs that's going to take them very far. And there's a lot of Cubs fans out there that are saying, and a lot of Cubs fans are saying it's a matter of time, they're going to hit, they're talented. They certainly are, but we've seen this before. We've seen talented teams, really young talented teams that just don't hit. So they need the bats, but I don't see the bats. So the one thing, I've kind of talked about with Brett Taylor, Bleacher Nation, and Saad Sharma, also Baseball Prospectus and BP Wrigleyville, is that Theo Epstein, when he was with the Red Sox in 2004, was very creative at the deadline and found a way to make some trades that nobody even anticipated. I don't know if you remember that year when he traded Nomar Garcia-Parra, and he got Orlando Cabrera, and he got Doug Mankiewicz, and made some trades to improve the team's defense, which is what they really needed. And people scratch their heads like, well, why would you trade Nomar? And they won the series that year. So it's really hard to predict what he's going to do. It's also really hard to count Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer out in terms of anything. So it's very possible that they go out and make the kind of deal that we're not even anticipating right now, to go out and get a big offensive player in a very creative way, that would improve that team significantly.
Well, the way I look at the trading deadline is this. There's always going to be a lot of smoke. And, there's always going to be like the names. You're going to hear all about the big names. When the Mets made the deal with the Braves and they got Jose Uribe and Kelly Johnson for a couple of minor leaguers, the vitriol being thrown at Sandy Alderson was beyond belief. But I sat there and I said, you know what? That's what you call a very shrewd move. You already know that David Wright may not be coming back this year with the spinal stenosis. You already know you have possibly the worst offense in Major League Baseball right now, and you fielded a lineup where you had three guys batting less than my co-host's weight. So it's almost as if you needed to make the move and you had to get it done right. And if you look at the numbers for Uribe and if you look at the numbers for Kelly Johnson, they're not eye-popping, obviously. I mean, they're pedestrian. But pedestrian in this day and age, for to put into the Mets lineup, actually helps shore things up. They got rid of John Mayberry Jr. They moved David Wright to the 60-day DL. They brought up Michael Conforto after Kadyr's injury. Conforto's their number one hitting prospect. Who knows? This may actually be somewhat of a catalyst and stuff like that.
Well, the other thing about the Mets. Here's the other thing about the Mets. Let's say the Mets, instead of doing this, had gone out and added Justin Upton. To your point, they don't need one hitter. They need upgrades in a bunch of places. So to get two upgrades, even if the upgrades aren't top shelf upgrades, are still better than the guys that we're running out there, like Mayberry, who you mentioned, like Eric Campbell, like Kirk Neuenhuis, who I know had another nice night tonight, but overall isn't really someone who inspires fear. They needed to fill a lot of holes, and those two guys, yes, they didn't get two superstars, but they got two players that if they spot them correctly are going to be better. And with Darno, presumably coming back, I would say in the next 7 to 10 days, he should be another upgrade as well, assuming he can stay on the field, which has always been an issue. So, to your point about the smoke and fire and all that, I think that's absolutely correct. I think that typically at the deadline or once in a while, there's one or two big players who move. It just isn't that common. I remember last year, Price and Lester moved, but you also had, John Lackey, Justin Masterson, Asdrubal Cabrera. Guys at that level are more typically the players that move, and if you're guessing who's going to move, those are probably the kind of guys you're going to see go. The big name I think will definitely move is Johnny Cueto. Beyond that, whether or not Hamels moves, I still think it's not a lock that he moves in the next few days. I mean, he could. Now
you mentioned Justin Upton. And the rumor has it right now that the Mets may actually still try to go after Upton, although I think they're like on the bottom end of the totem pole when you talk about teams going after a guy like that. But the name that's been thrown around is Zach Wheeler. Now, when I heard that, I was like, okay, I understand he's got the arm injury. He's not going to be back until at least May or June of next year. But look at the rotation you may be throwing out in 2016. Matt Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, Jacob deGrom, Steven Matz, and Zach Wheeler, in which you have the luxury of also having Jonathan Neese and possibly Bartolo Colon. Look, Colon, for all that he's done for the Mets this year, which is a yeoman effort, this is not the Bartolo Colon that won the Cy Young Award or was a Cy Young candidate back in the early 2000s. John Neese is your daily, normal, fourth, fifth starter, grinder type of guy that when he's good, he's good. When he's bad, he's off. If you trade Zach Wheeler and if you get Justin Upton, you better sign Upton to some sort of contract extension, because if you only do it as a rental, this is going to be Carlos Beltran in reverse. And trust me when I say that.
Well, I would. Well, that rumor to me, and I think it was Andy Martino of the Daily News who posted it. I kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's probably something that the Mets are floating around out there. But if you think, how many times has a pitcher during post-TJ, but before he's even stepped onto the field again, been traded? I don't even know if it's ever happened. Maybe it's happened once. I can't think of an example readily. So I think it's fairly unlikely. As far as Upton goes, or anyone like that, I think the Mets are in a position, and I don't think they're going to get Upton for the reason that they're not going to trade big pieces from their farm. I'd heard that the Padres are looking for two top-level guys, and beyond the fact that the Mets' strength right now is in their lower minors, a lot of people just come up. I just don't think they want to do that based on the payroll. The one thing about Upton, though, if they did get him, is that I don't have it in front of me right now, but there's a lot of money this doesn't even take into account Wright if he can't play again and the insurance pays him. But even if Wright's there in 2016, there's a good amount of money coming off the books for the Mets next year. Even if you don't figure on guys that they're going to non-tender. And, Nice, honestly, with the rotation you just mentioned, is a non-tender trade possibility. But I think Colon's a free agent. There's a couple other guys that on the lesser level that are coming off the books. The Mets are in a weird position, even if they keep this payroll around $100 million, which it was 101 entering this year. They might have some money to spend, and it'll be really interesting to see if they go after somebody like an Upton on the market or a Jason Hayward or a player like that in the past wasn't in their wheelhouse. But if their payroll, if the threshold is low enough, and it looks like it is when you kind of rattle off the combination of these free agents and the non-tender guys, they might be able, or they might make a play for one of these guys. And that doesn't even speak to the idea that, and who knows with the weird situation with their finances and the Madoffs and the interest and all that boring stuff, who knows if they'll actually get a bump next year. But even assuming that they don't, even assuming they're in this $100 million range, it looks like they're going to have some flexibility, which they haven't had in a while.
From your words to God's ears, let's hope you are right, sir. Mike, thanks so much for joining us this evening here in the lab. Why don't you let the good people out there know where your trail handler is, and once again, tell them about your good work at Baseball Prospectus.
It's Mike Gianella, all one word, Gianella, and Baseball Prospectus. You can check us out at that website, baseballprospectus.com. And like a lot of sites, if you come sign up with us, and you can get a subscription, and basically you can get a discount through DraftKings, which is kind of a nice combination, which I know a lot of places are running. So, come to the site, check it out. A lot of the work is premium and behind a paywall, but with that discount, it's quite affordable.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us this evening. Have a good night, sir, and enjoy the rest of the summer. Definitely got to get you back on, especially when the postseason rolls around.
Yep. Thanks a lot, guys.
That was Mike Gianella from Baseball Prospectus, ladies and gentlemen. Another great conversation, especially when it comes to the MLB. And we're now moving into the second half of our show, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, you're listening live right here on the Inscriber Media Network. This is the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports, Nick Ficarelli, along with the esteemed apprentice, Dr. Andrew Lugoff. We're going to be talking about some NBA now. We got two guests for you tonight. First up, ladies and gentlemen, a very extremely good friend of mine. Let me just say that when I've been a guest on his show many, many times, and he at one time deemed me the king of rants. And, I would always get 5 good minutes on his show, and I would either have him in tears or I would have his jaw drop to the ground. But when it comes to sports talk, this is a guy that you must listen to on a weekly basis. He is the host of the Earnestly Speaking podcast, my good friend, Ernest Christian. Ernest, how you doing tonight?
Mr. Ficarelli, how you been, man? It's been a long, long time.
Yes, I know. This is your first time in the lab. Welcome, sir.
It's actually the first time in the lab. Yeah, that's right. That is absolutely correct. I'm very excited, man.
Also joining us tonight is a guy that I started following on Twitter a little bit, and I thought I was the king of rants sometimes, but oh my God, when it comes to very entertaining when it comes to talking sports, very entertaining when it comes to rants, especially when it's on sports. Ladies and gentlemen, the man known as the Kanye of sports rants, Richard Atkins. Richard, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome aboard, gentlemen. Obviously, I brought you guys in here to talk a little bit about the NBA tonight. And, let's just get it out of the way first. Let's just get it out of the way. Josh Smith, earlier this week, comes out and says at $6.9 million, he will have a hard time feeding his family. Now, when I heard that, it harkens me back to the day of Latrell Sprewell saying the same thing. This is when Sprewell was making $10+ million a year. And I said to myself, $6.9 million, and you're going to have a hard time feed your family. So I guess beluga caviar, I guess, gold leaf chocolates, I guess whatever else that you feed your family, it's not going to be enough. I almost wanted to shake my head and say that people these days just don't get it. Everybody knows I'm a family man. Everybody knows I'm a guy that, works, hours upon hours at my job in order to, bring home a paycheck to provide for my family. EJ, I know you do that. Drew does that. Rich, I know you do that as well. And for someone to come out and say such a quote like that obviously probably went to the Donald Trump school stupidity. And, to me, it's just another sign of an athlete not thinking before he speaks. Rich, I'm going to start with you first, and then I'm going to go to you, EJ. Go ahead.
It's definitely just another moment in history of sports history of an athlete talking before he thinks. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're not talking about a guy with 15 different kids. We're talking about a guy who has a wife with 3 kids, made over $90 million in his career. Now, I'm not the type of person to speak on somebody's different finances because, of course, when you have that type of money, your expenses is a little higher than most. But it is still ridiculous for him to come out, especially when it's people who having hard finances problems with many kids living off of $40,000, $30,000, even $20,000 a year and still surviving and not complaining. People in different people's shoes would love to make $6.9 million a year, and for him to have it and kind of complain about it, kind of say it's going to be hard, is ridiculous. And in my opinion, it's an insult to many hard-working people out there who is struggling, living check to check to provide for their family, wishing they could even come close to $500,000, yet alone $6.9 million.
EJ, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, once again, it's one of the situations where we're not privy to that kind of lifestyle. I'm assuming I'm going to assume that everyone on this panel does not really have that kind of income really regularly. So, I mean, look, is it ridiculous? Yes, but that's kind of obvious. I mean, the guy, obviously spoke. When I saw the story too yesterday, the first thing came to mind was like, wow, okay, this is kind of weird, but I want to see context. But there's really no context other than the comments. And to me, it's a situation where a guy, obviously he's on another tax bracket, than we are. Is it ridiculous? Absolutely ridiculous. It's just I wish these guys, when they spoke, I wish they thought before they spoke. But does it make me mad? Not really, because I have this thing where I don't like. I have this odd thing where I don't like. I'm not really big on other people's money. It's their money, regardless if people agree, disagree with how much money they make. If they players overpay, whatever. I mean, that's one thing. But I just wish Josh Smith would just think before he spoke. That's all. I mean, I like the kid. He's a good guy. He's he's a decent player in the NBA. I just wish he thought about it.
And Drew, why don't you put the ball on it?
Here's my thought on it. I've had the unique perspective. Growing up, things were well. My family owned a Bentley. Fast forward a few years, not so well, leaving Ohio with our tail between our legs, living a much simpler life. So I've got to live both sides of this is what infuriates me even more. You can get by with very little. We had to. You can also get by with a lot. That's a tribute to his lack of maturity and really any social grace. Because if he had any tact whatsoever, he never would have complained about the fact that he's still banking $6.9 million gross. And you take out the taxes, you're still in the 7 figures. And granted, pro sports players pay ridiculous amount of taxes. There was the leaked pay stub, I think it was of Andrew McCutcheon from the Pittsburgh Pirates, that had ridiculous number of deductions due to taxes from different states and different cities, but still walk away with a very friendly paycheck that a couple of those, and you have my year's salary. So this whole thing is just, it reeks of stupid. I have a shirt at home that says, "Stay back, I'm allergic to stupid," and it just makes me want to sneeze all over the place.
Well, good one.
You know what's coming, right, Drew?
There's a Nick. There's a it's a word. It's a word, and it has letters in it. But it also has dashes. It's a mix of 3 powerful words, making the super word, a word beyond other words. Nick, why don't you start talking about this word that is so powerful? It is 3 words rolled into one ultimate word.
Well, when you hear a story like this, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's a travesty. But no, it really isn't a travesty. It's more like a sham. That's not good enough. This is actually a mockery. You know what this really is, people? This is a travesty mockery. A travesty, a sham, and a mockery all put into one very powerful word here on the Mad Scientist Sports Plan. And a travesty and mockery. Oh, and by the way, just to let you know, Mr. Smith, that's what we think of your $6.9 million problem that you have right now there, tough guy. So do me a favor. Go back to where you are and, wallow in your sorrow and your $100 bills and everything like that, while me and the rest of everybody else, tries to make a living the hard way and provide for our families and make sure that everybody lives a happy lifestyle, because God freaking forbid that I had $6.9 million somewhere where I can't provide for my family. I got 2 words for you: jackass. Thank you so much. Let's move on.
Hey
Becky Hammon.
Nick, before you jump to the more feel-good story of Becky Hammon, because that's actually a better story, I want to keep on the Travis Shamaki for just a sec, because this came out just this week, but it looks like we're on the way for another Travis Shamaki, with LeBron James signing the deal with Warner Brothers to essentially clear the way for a second Space Jam movie. As we know, when they take an old movie that's been around for a while and try to bring it back, it becomes a massive pile of like rat feces. I mean, did anyone ever see the 4th Indiana Jones movie?
I have to agree there.
The 4th Indiana Jones was a great movie until the aliens came. I just think this is a Travis Shamaki, Nick. Actually, and I want to open the floor to all you guys. What do you think about this horrible development that's going on? I have friends who have kids that are not going to be able to sleep at night knowing that this could happen, and they may have to go watch it, and they may have to buy merchandise for it. It's like a huge calamity upon us.
Well, I'll tell you from my perspective real quick.
I was about to say, before we go any further, I will say this. I was a fan of the first Space Jam. I was. I mean, every time it comes on, the movie channels and stuff like that, I like to watch it. And I started to get my kids to watch it. But to hear that there's going to be a Space Jam 2, the first thing I thought of was, once again, Hollywood is running out of ideas for original movies, because it seems to me that on every given month there's some sort of reboot of a franchise that is just driving me absolutely crazy. Do I want to see a Space Jam 2? No. Is it going to be forced down our throats? Most likely, yes. And we're going to be watching LeBron James and Bugs Bunny playing against another version of the Monstars or whatever else they could possibly think of. Maybe the Monstars this time around will be Manute Bol, Kobe Bryant, and whoever else they could possibly think of. But anyway, I digress.
I think Bill Murray's too old to play now.
Oh yeah, Bill Murray's 65 years old now? Yeah. Yeah, he's way too old. I'll be honest with you, from my perspective, first of all, and because this rumor's been going around for the last year and a half now. This whole Space Jam 2. Now, my perspective, I'm not even a fan of the first one. I didn't like the first one anyways. It doesn't even matter to me. Like this whole story. Like I wish LeBron. Like if this story actually has legs, because first of all, it's not even confirmed. This is the idea. This is the idea that this may happen. And for all we know, that what we heard this last week about, with the Warner Brothers deal, this could be just them putting out feelers to see if people actually will be receptive to the idea of LeBron James playing, in the Space Jam 2. Personally, I don't care because I didn't like the first one anyway. So it didn't really matter, So, but the larger point with LeBron, I just hope that he creates his own path. Like, one of the things I think we forget about LeBron James, and when we have this LeBron-Michael Jordan comparison, is that LeBron James is the first person. He's the first of what we've seen ever. Okay, what LeBron is doing today, like not just on the court but off the court as an ambassador for the NBA, and also in terms of the community, whatever. He's very different from Michael Jordan in every which way. Okay, he's actually a lot more vocal about issues of the court about issues than Michael Jordan ever was. And I like to think that LeBron James will continue to pave his own path and create his own ventures and stuff as opposed to following something that was done before. Hopefully the Space Jam. I hope the Space Jam 2 thing is not a real thing. To be honest with you, I hope that's just like a feeler.
I have something to say on that.
Go ahead, Rich. I know you've been chomping at the bit. Go ahead.
I actually don't have a problem with Space Jam 2. I am a huge fan of Space Jam 1. I grew up on it like you guys probably did on VCR, rewinding it back and forth just to see certain parts. And I actually like the idea of bringing it back. I wish they had it probably 05, 06 with prime Kobe Bryant, and then possibly have a Space Jam 3 with LeBron James. But we have to look at it like this. LeBron James is what Jordan was back in the day. He is the best player on the planet. He is the guy. He is the main guy. So, yes, I think it's great to have. I just hope it's not cheesy. That's the one thing you got to hope, because usually when you have a sequel or you have a number 2 or something, it turns out to be a little cheesy, not as original. Just keep it simple, keep it fun, keep it great, and I don't think it'll be a problem with it.
I like that. I'm there. I'm just not a fan of the first one anyway, so my thing is I want LeBron to continue his own path, because to me, people want to compare this all the time with Jordan. To me, he is so different from Jordan in every way, in every which way. I don't see a comparison to him and Jordan in any way, period.
I agree with that, because, on the court, they are different styles. Off the court, a lot of people don't understand how much of a I don't know if I can say this on the show, but Jordan was. LeBron James isn't really that. The baddest thing LeBron did was leave Cleveland to go to Miami to win. So it's really different as far as personality goes and on the court as far as their play style goes.
Right.
Well, I'm going to put a bow on this one. I'm going to say, if they make a Space Jam 2, it will make money. People will go to see it. People from the
you will too,
generation.
Nick. You'll see it too, Nick.
Yeah,
Ticket rates will be there in theaters. Taking the kids too. Yep.
I have my kids, and I
have no kids. I'm safe.
I am not going to go see LeBron James. I am going to go see Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Foghorn Leghorn, Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner, whoever else they can, all the rest of the Looney Tunes. All I pray is that it's not another. All I know is that I hope it's not another Amazing Grace and Chuck. There, I just dropped the mic because that's an old school basketball movie that probably everybody's like, what the hell's Amazing Grace and Chuck? Anyway, I'm going to go now.
Thank you.
We're going to go now.
I got to see that now.
We're going to move now to, one of the feel-good stories of the Summer League that just happened, and that's being Becky Hammon. When it was first announced that Becky Hammon was going to be the coach for the Spurs Summer League team, it raised a lot of eyebrows. It moved. A lot of heads turned, and they were like, "Wow, okay, this is interesting." Well, let me tell you something. And I will put this on air right now. Becky Hammon will be Gregory Popovich's replacement in a couple of years in the NBA. You want to talk about a brilliant basketball mind? Look no further than Becky Hammon. What she did with the kids and some of the veterans that were playing for the Summer League, what she did and the way she handled herself, the way she made adjustments, you know that Pop had something up his sleeve. This is a woman that, has played basketball for the WNBA, has played international for Russia, which a lot of people don't realize, that she actually has a dual citizenship with the United States and with Russia, and she ended up playing with Russia, I believe in the 2008 and 2012 Olympics and the 2010 FIBA Championships. And her mind is a step ahead of many other assistant coaches, male assistant coaches in the NBA. And when you also learn at the feet of one Greg Popovich, you will be prepared for the next level. We only saw a taste of what possibly could happen in the Summer League. I am very, very interested to see what happens during the regular season, while she's on the bench, barking at Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili, LaMarcus Aldridge. Can't believe I'm saying that name in the Spurs in the same sentence. But, David West, another one. Kawhi Leonard. You look at Tony Parker, but you have no choice but to marvel at this. And it's a feel-good story. Rich, how do you feel about Becky Hammon coaching the Summer League? And do you think yourself that she will be Pop's replacement for the Spurs?
Like you said, it's a feel-good story. It's definitely knocking down some walls. It's just an amazing, and it's not like this is just some random person off the street. This is a female with a lot of experience, more than some coaches that are actually hired in the NBA today. This is just really great. Now, as far as being the replacement for Greg Pop, I don't think she will be. I think a team will come and snatch her up before Greg Pop is out of San Antonio. But, of course, the experience that she will gain just beneath Greg Pop and then being able to coach those veteran players like you named, David West, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, coaching a little bit of the younger guys who are still very experienced due to being on that San Antonio Spurs team, like Danny Green. Just messing with the different personalities will be huge for her, and we already seen it from a lot of coaches, former coaches, that was on the Greg Pop coaching staff. So it's going to be huge for her. Best of luck for her in the NBA. And it's just an amazing story to see that she's knocking down these walls. And it's just a great story, man. That's all there is to it. But I think a team will come hollering probably in a year or two, probably 2 to 3 years. A team will come hollering because Greg Pop is expected to play out the rest of his contract. So I do not expect to see her there for that long. I think a team will come hollering, whether it's for a media stunt to get tickets or because she just really will be a good coach, regardless of what it is. I think a team will come snatch her up.
EJ, what do you think?
Well, that's just the fact. You know she's smart, number one. It's the fact that she chose San Antonio. I mean, if you're going to polish yourself to be the real thing, there are very few teams in the league you want to be under the umbrella of the San Antonio Spurs, who are first class personified. The coach under Popovich and the players and that culture there. I mean, that to me, if you're trying to polish yourself to be legit, there's no better place to go to do that. My only concern moving forward for Becky Hammon is, and she's knocking down a lot of doors and whatnot. My concern is, if she does decide to go solo and actually run her own team, is the intentions behind. That's what's for her, because I trust her. She has the credentials. She's obviously good enough to do this on this stage. My issue is, there are a lot of teams who are in this business, a lot of owners in this business for pop first before championships, and a lot of teams may want to hire her solely on just selling tickets, and that's the one thing where I'd be more concerned if I'm Becky Hammon, in terms of my future, as a head coach. Beyond that, she's done a great job, and I think, like I said, if I'm her, I would try to stay in San Antonio as long as possible, learn as much as she can. Obviously, there will be other challenges to go through with her, and relating to obviously being a female. The reality is there is still she's a coach in a male league, so there's still challenges moving forward. And I would think it'd be smart for her to stay as long as possible under the umbrella of San Antonio moving forward.
Now, Drew, I got to ask you about Becky Hammon. I mean, you and me were talking about earlier in the week, how, monumental this was when, leading a team to the Summer League Championship and stuff like that. What do you think?
Well, let's, we're in a new social age in the world, particularly in America, and I'm of the view of if you are the best of your craft, you should be at the very top. And Becky Hammon's proven to be one of the best of her craft, and that's basketball. Basketball has no gender. It's a ball, it's a court, and it's a hoop. It has no gender. So the fact that she's one of the best of her craft, you put her behind door number 1 and someone on door number 2, and you start listing credentials, people are going to pick her based on one of the top assistant coaches in the league. She will be the first women NBA head coach. I mean, at this point, it's all but certain. She's proven the mettle.
Yep.
Yeah, she's proven to be ready to handle this kind of pressure. Popovich wouldn't throw her in to run the summer league if he didn't have faith that she would succeed, and that faith was well-founded. I believe that she will continue to improve. I mean, if you have a great basketball mind, you have a great basketball mind, and that should be used. That should be tapped. That needs to be a gift given to the rest of us fans to be able to enjoy watching their product on the court. We've probably seen some, ass backwards teams and, in a variety of different leagues that haven't quite caught on to this new age thought that there may be a person of another gender or some other different background that may actually be really good at what they do. And so I'm thrilled that the San Antonio Spurs, behind the leadership of Greg Popovich, have realized that real talent doesn't necessarily have to be out of a man. It's just real talent. And we're all benefiting from it. So I think keep it going. Keep it coming.
I'm going to throw up a ball in and say this and say that I was very proud to actually witness Becky Hammon do what she did, and I have no doubt in my mind that she's going on to bigger and better things. I really do feel it's going to be with the Spurs. I mean, for Greg Popovich to pretty much give his feel of football to do what he did and put her in charge of the summer league team, that to me is like the ultimate stamp of approval. Now, last thing, guys, we'll try to make it short and sweet. Obviously, we know about the DeAndre Jordan saga that took place a couple of weeks ago. He's still apologizing. I'm saying why. There's no reason to. What's done is done. You made your bed. You're sleeping in it. Fine. Move on. Let's get it over with. But it seems to me that he still feels guilty about what he did. Well, it was crappy the way it turned out, that you made a choice and then you reneged on that choice. Thing is, people, you didn't put pen to paper. People say, it was the first time that he ever went to big-time free agency. He had tunnel vision, and then after the tunnel vision opened up, he was like, oh, God, did I make the right choice? So to continuously apologize, to me, makes him look even weaker than what transpired a couple of weeks ago. Rich, your thoughts?
It's kind of sad that he's still apologizing. I mean, Mark Cuban you kind of get the feel that the Dallas Mavericks and Mark Cuban is over it. Just let it go. You made your decision. I think him constantly apologizing and is basically just making it relevant, reminding people of what he did. What he did, to some was very wrong. To others, it was, a personal move. To me, I'm a Nets fan, a Brooklyn Nets fan, so I couldn't even imagine if I had an all-star caliber player like DeAndre Jordan say he will come to my team, and then the day before he signs his contract, basically just ignores us and signs back with his old team. As a fan, I would be upset, and they have every right to be upset. But again, this is old news. So many good things happening in the NBA. So many great things on the way. Summer League was amazing. Let's just let this go. Let it go. It's over now. It is over. Let it go. Let it go.
I think he's trying to tell us something.
Drew, if I had a sound drop for Let It Go right now, I would have played it.
I would kill
Frozen. Oh God.
I might have reached through the microphone and wringed your neck if you did that.
Yeah,
that was perfect. That would have been a perfect sound drop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
EJ, put the ball on.
Now, to be fair, though, it takes two to tango here now. Mark Cuban hasn't let it go either. Now, granted, Mark Cuban is the victim in the situation, I agree, but he's been the one that was out there also, even as recent as a couple of days ago, commenting on it, comparing the situation to makeup sex, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, okay, DeAndre, let it go, but Mark Cuban's also in the wrong here, too. Here's the bottom line. Look, it was a bad situation. It was wrong from the start. Obviously, DeAndre feels bad what it did. I mean, it was bad. What's a shame about it, too, is the fact that we're not talking about the Clippers being a team in the mix to win the West next year, because that with DeAndre back in the lap now, with all the additions they made with Paul Pierce and Lance Stevenson and whatnot, and even now added Josh Smith. This is a team now that can actually compete in the West. Let's not forget, this team just beat San Antonio 2 months ago in the first round of the playoffs. Now, granted, minus LaMarcus Aldridge, but this team can compete in the West, and all we're talking about right now is the DeAndre Mark Cuban fiasco. I agree. Let it go. It's over. Let's talk about basketball and talk about things that can happen on the court, which is whether this team can compete for a championship next year.
Drew, put the ball on it.
I'd first like to say, damn, that is some fast talking.
Well, I know it's short on time. That's why I set it up.
Well, that is talent that I do not have. But let's be honest. This is old news that should go away. I'm from the school from my father's profession of being in the jewelry business. A handshake is worth something. Not everyone believes the same thing. That's their prerogative. The handshake here was not worth its weight in gold. Okay, he got flack for it. Let's move on. I mean, technically the Mavericks have moved on. They allow free agents to renegotiate and look elsewhere. Look at Richard Jefferson. They told, okay, you can go talk to someone else. We're changing directions. And he goes signs off in Cleveland. While Cuban may be asked questions, the Mavericks themselves have moved on. DeAndre Jordan has to stop feeding the fire here. Maybe he feels this is the only thing that makes him relevant at this point. But just go away, work on your off-season program, come back, play again next fall, and just focus on basketball. This is a joke.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. Gentlemen, it was great having you on tonight. Why don't you guys let the people know where they can find you, on social media and tell all about the stuff that you guys do. Rich, why don't you let the good people know about your YouTube show?
Yeah, guys. Thank you again to the Sports Lab for having me on. This is fun. Invite me anytime. I will be down to go on. But for guys at home listening, you can always catch me daily with my rant videos. It's youtube.com/rantwithsportsxvi365. And, of course, my Twitter @sportsxvi. Come join the sports family where we are talking sports daily, sports questions, sports debates. It's like a local barbershop. That's how I like it, and that's how we do it.
Awesome. And EJ, obviously everybody knows who you are and everybody knows about your show, but plug away, my friend. Plug away.
Well, I'm back this week after a 2-week hiatus. I took some time off to just kind of recharge as NFL's coming up soon. Find me on Twitter, of course, @EJChris7, the Earth Speaker Podcast, live every Friday, 4 to 6 on Happy Hour Network. And Nick, it's great being back in the lab, man. Love it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good night, and definitely talk to you all in the near future, all right?
Definitely, man. Take care. Have a good weekend.
And that was EJ Christian and Richard Jenkins joining us talking NBA. And, of course, our last guest is in the lab, and this gentleman honestly really needs no introduction. He's the perfect guy to help close the show because when it comes to talking football, especially college football, the amount of work that this guy puts in on a yearly basis is absolutely amazing. I mean, he studies the tapes, breaks everything down to the most minute points, and he's been to the Senior Bowl. He writes now for Football Gameplan, and on top of everything else, he writes for the Baltimore Times now. He's a very good friend of mine, and welcoming him back into the lab, as always, to close out my show sometimes, Mr. Turron Davenport. Turron, how you doing tonight?
Hey, what's going on, man? How's everything?
Everything's going well. Everything's going well. I've seen you've been a very, very busy man with the Baltimore Ravens, as well as getting ready for some college football in the not too distant future coming up here. So let's get things started with Braxton Miller and my esteemed colleague, or should I say esteemed apprentice, is going to ask you a few questions about it. But before I do that with him, I was going to say, do you think Braxton Miller made the right choice in switching positions from quarterback to wide receiver, especially, knowing now that it may help him in the draft process, although everybody remembers him as, one of the better quarterbacks in college football. Do you think this helps or hinders him?
I honestly really think that he should have remained as a quarterback. I know that's not the opinion that a lot of people want to hear, but I think that he's more of a quarterback than a receiver or H-back or the versatile player that they're trying to make him out to be. He definitely should have remained as quarterback.
Okay, Andrew, it's all yours.
Well, let me just, Nick, before I start pounding questions, I think the move is for him. He's looking at the next level. We saw Terrell Pryor not really cut it in the NFL as a quarterback and is trying something different as a wide receiver. This is a preemptive move. You have two very capable quarterbacks that have shown to be a lot of talent. And Braxton, being such a dynamic player, is going to see about using that talent elsewhere. He's not an NFL quarterback. I knew that about 2 years ago. So
why is it that you bring up Terrell Pryor when you talk of Braxton Miller? Because there really aren't any similarities.
There's a lot of similarities. We're talking about a quarterback that has a multi-level skill set. Terrell Pryor, like Braxton Miller, has outstanding legs. Miller, a more accurate quarterback, let's not mince words, and an overall better athlete. But it's such a dynamic skill set. Has good hands to be able to hold on to the ball, has great legs, great agility, cutting speed, downfield running, has it all, and is trying to utilize it in the best way for him to get to the next level. And after seeing J.T. Barrett and Cardale Jones just absolutely light it up during the season for Ohio State, it became very apparent that Ohio State's set. They don't need Miller as a quarterback to win. And I think Miller's realizing it too. So you know what? Take that awesome skill set that he has that others who even are naturally wide receivers or H-backs or whatever position he's going to end up playing and become the best at that craft. He can do that. He's that good. And I think this is a smart move for him by doing it a year early. Get those skills. Set yourself up that you can also still play behind center and become a multi-dimensional player that the Wildcat package was truly built for. Someone who has a real arm, not just a gimmicky arm, as well as great legs. And I think this is a smart move. But that's my take. Turron, it sounded like you didn't quite agree with me, though.
Well, hey, I mean, if Arnett's battle and Hines Ward could do it, why can't Braxton Miller? I guess that's the – I think that there's a point in time where you let your playmakers be playmakers. He was the Big Ten Player of the Year as a quarterback. I don't think that is something to be taken lightly. I mean, the guy can play the quarterback position, but, hey, at the end of the day, this is a decision that he made. But I really think that a lot of these quarterbacks coming out now, it's unfortunate that their athleticism is kind of being used against them and they're not allowed to show themselves as a quarterback. I think that he's very capable of being a quarterback. I think that, when the competition really came down to it, I think that he could have beat out J.T. Barrett and Cardale Jones. But at the end of the day, like I said, this is his decision. He made his decision to play the wide receiver position, but I'll tell you this much, it's not as easy of a transition as many make it out to be.
Yeah, and if I'm correct, Urban Meyer hasn't quite signed off on it yet, so we'll see what he decides. Let's change gears a little bit, and I'll be honest, I wear the black and gold goggles sometimes. I'm a UCF graduate, but there seems to be a lot of smoke going on with the Big 12. They recently appointed an expansion committee of 3 presidents. Turron, what do you think the chances are the Big 12 actually expanding to 12 teams?
That would be really interesting. I don't think that they're going to expand. I think they're going to remain where they are. It's something I guess we'll have to see, but I haven't heard anything as far as them expanding into more teams, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, they haven't made any ruling yet, and I think it's going to be a while. But they do have at least a committee set up. If you were the Big 12 presidents and you were all of them thrown together in some weird, monster-like object, some weird Cronenberg thing, and you had the ability to make that single decision, what school? If you had to bring in 2 schools, what schools would you bring? Would you look east? Would you look west? Would you look for television markets? What would you look for in a program if you needed to bring in a new program?
Well, I mean, I would look at the independents, and anytime you're looking at independents, one of the names that always comes up is Notre Dame. So, I mean, that's a team that I would definitely look at trying to bring in, because you just look at the marketing and look at the popularity that Notre Dame has. So that would be the first team I would try to bring in, regardless of geographical locations or anything like that. That would be the one that I would try to bring in.
You think the Big 12 can pry them from the ACC? The little Texas money?
Well, I mean, it's all a matter of placement. You know, where a team would think they could be more successful and get more exposure. I think that's really the main thing, and make no secret about it. The Big 12 is a very popular conference. Obviously, the ACC with Florida State and Clemson is on a rise, but I mean, hey, look at the Big 12. Look at the teams in there. So I think Notre Dame is a team that could come in there and be a nice addition. But again, I don't really see any additions at all in that conference over the next couple of years.
Fair enough. Keeping in the Big 12, we're starting to see a little bit of the fallout for the financial changes going on in particular Division I sports, FBS schools. It came down the pipeline yesterday that Texas is cutting their free meal program from coaches and staff to save money. I mean, we're talking about Texas, of all schools, looking to save about $300,000. If Texas is doing this because of the cost of attendance being an issue, the free meal program for the players being an issue, and other money-based items being an issue for players, what else do you see? If Texas is cutting this, where do you see these cuts going? You know, UAB barely got their football program back starting in 2017. Could this kill it off? Something like this kill it off again?
I don't think so. I think you have to look at this the same way that you look at a business. Okay, so a business that is traded publicly, what do they have? They have shareholders. What does a big-time school have? They have the boosters, you know. So what you have to do is always show the boosters some type of gain, just the same as you have to show some type of gain and a financial plus to your shareholders. So I think that this is just something that they'll kind of bring about to show some way that they could cut costs and maintain the program. Because as you mentioned, the UAB situation is something that I think opened a lot of eyes. So that being said, schools are going to be looking at ways to show that their program can sustain some type of success and financial success as an institution on the sports side of things. So I think that's what you're seeing there. As far as the cuts and things like that, I mean, I don't know if there will be any further cuts, but you have to consider schools like Texas and some of the other schools. I think Baylor has a contract with Nike as well. I mean, some of these schools have contracts with these big-time companies, and the companies provide uniforms and obviously marketing opportunities and things like that. So that's another way to kind of gain some type of income and keep the program, so to speak, rolling on the positive side of things.
And to keep on the money train, there's been more and more growing talk, not even specifically with college football, but it impacts it, about uncoupling television programs within cable networks, Verizon, Dish, whatever, which would then make ESPN have to essentially stand alone. They charge $8-9 per subscriber per month for their product. They have a huge overhead because of live programming. If this uncoupling happens, which it potentially can, Verizon's already starting to do it, and you go a la carte, what does this mean for ESPN's business model as far as college sports? And college sports being live is huge. You got ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN3, ESPNU, and they even put stuff on ESPN News during college football season, not including the wraparound goal line / buzzer beater. What will this do to the television contracts that ESPN has with all these different conferences and the exposure that comes with it?
I think what you'll see is an uproar, not an uproar, but an upcoming of a lot of individual conference networks. Turn on SEC Network right now. You'll probably see the top 20, they're showing the top 20 games of the year, and you'll see a really good game. I know in the past month or so, every time that I couldn't find anything to watch on TV, I would click on SEC Network, and what do I see? Ole Miss versus Auburn, or South Carolina versus Florida, a game that I want to watch. So I think that that's something that they could kind of tap into and really take hold of, and that's individual conference networks. Look at the BIG network, man. I've watched teams from Penn State versus Ohio State back in 1997 on up to Penn State, Ohio State in 2013. So those games that you really want to see are on those networks, and they air it. And hey, I mean, people like myself, I'm sure I'm not one of a kind, that there's people across the nation who want to see these older games and will tune in. And that's ratings. And, the ratings is what sells. That's how you generate the marketing, the advertising, so to speak. So that's one way that these conferences could kind of get away from ESPN and not have to worry about using them as the primary driving force for their marketing side of things.
So in short, just to kind of wrap that up, you could see the conferences breaking free and doing their own thing, because like the Big Ten Network is partially Fox, the SEC and the Longhorn Network are partially ESPN.
Right.
You can see the conferences themselves taking these networks back. ESPN, Fox, whoever gave them the infrastructure set up, but if those networks can't afford it, I'm sure the Big Ten themselves has plenty of demand. So do you see them fully taking it over?
I could see them fully taking it over. I mean, taking control of the production and everything else, and the contracts for the different on-air talents that they have. I could definitely see that. I mean, you look at the SEC, from Maria Taylor to my man Booger McFarland to Greg McElroy to Danny Cannell. I mean, there's a wide range of guys that these different conferences have to lean back on. And if they don't have those guys to lean on, you could always grab somebody. I mean, listen, when these guys get done playing, and in their college career, and if the NFL doesn't pan out, they have to find some source of income. So you could bring on a guy that was a college star. I mean, look at what they did with Tim Tebow. Obviously, he's with the Eagles now, but, there was a point in time with Tim Tebow, obviously he was on ESPN, but he nonetheless is somebody that they pulled to get on air. Look at David Pollack as an example. There's plenty of guys that come out every year that don't work out that you could take and have them be able to be still around the game. Because one thing that you have to understand is when you love football, you want to be around the game. Even if it's not being able to come out the locker room and hear the crowd roar for you, you still want to be able to hear that crowd roar. And that's one opportunity that these guys that are fresh out of school that don't make it to the league can take advantage of. They could be those ones that these networks have, and fortunately for the networks, this is a fresh name, a guy that will bring popularity, so guess what? It's a perfect match.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I played football when I was younger. I try to be around it as much as possible. I miss it. It was a lot of fun. If I could, I'd go into coaching. One more question before I let you go. We had the SEC Media Days not too long ago, and the overall attitude that I noticed out of the coaches was excuse making. You know, the SEC has not won the title the last couple of years, and between Gus Malzahn, Gary Pinkel, Nick Saban, these three guys in particular were all making excuses as to why their prospective team is not winning a national title. Some people are saying, oh, well, they're right. It's the SEC. I disagree. It's excuses. You know, they have a month in between the end of the season, the bowl game. People are going to get healthy. It levels the playing field. Do you think it's just excuse-making, or do you really think that they're correct that the rigors of the SEC is just too much?
I think it's excuse-making. I believe in the saying that iron sharpens iron. So when a school like Alabama has to go against Mississippi State and Ole Miss, and they have to go and let's say they're playing against the SEC East, and that they have to go against a team like let's just team out there, Tennessee. Each time that you go against a top-tier team like this, it's for the better. It is definitely for the better. And I don't think that there's any excuse. I mean, you shouldn't use your competition as an excuse. You shouldn't use the guys that you have with pro potential as an excuse. I think that the Nick Saban thing about Amari Cooper stepping out of bounds, I think that's just absurd. At the end of the day, as a competitor, you want to always go against the best competition. And quite frankly, a school that plays, the Helen Keller school for the deaf, instead of a team like a Auburn or a team like Ohio State in their off-conference games, I think that's something that should be held against them, as a matter of fact. So I think that competition, breeds success, and like I said, iron sharpens iron. So there's no excuse. At the end of the day, playing against a team that is also top-notch will only prepare you better for a game against another team that's a top-notch team in a championship type of game.
Well, thank you, Turron. I really appreciated the answer because I live in Florida. So I'm in Southeastern Conference territory, and I have a lot of Gator fan friends who are basically mimicking the comments made by these coaches because how dare the SEC not win? So I appreciate the dose of honesty and truth. But I know you have to get going, so I wanted to give you a chance to drop your Twitter and all that jazz, and then we can let you go.
Yeah, definitely. You could give me a follow at @TDavenport_NFL. I do, like I said, a lot of Ravens work. I cover the Ravens. We got Veterans Reporting next Wednesday, and you can find my work at BaltimoreTimes-online.com. And I also do a lot of draft work. I have some pretty good draft prospect profiles coming out. There's a series out already, and you can find that at footballgameplan.com, man. And, it's good talking shop with you, and, it's always fun talking shop, man. I love this game, so any opportunity to talk about it is a great opportunity for me.
Well, we appreciate having you, and I think I speak for Nick on that, too. We love having, men that have intelligence and know their craft. So we love having you on, talking some real ball, and answering some very off-the-wall questions that I was throwing at you. You didn't skip a beat.
It's all good, man. That's what we do. We talk shop, brother.
Hey,
all right,
Turron,
my friend.
Thank you so much, Turron. Greatly appreciate you having on the show. Obviously, when the season comes around, we're going to be having you on hopefully a lot more frequently because we definitely love talking the shop with you.
Definitely. Hey, Nick, you know what happened when the guy, he was in the middle of the field and he made the tackle and he looked up in the stands? What did he yell?
That's a good question. What did he yell?
That's a throwback joke that we have, man, back for our days on the NFC West Recess,
How
man.
could I ever forget that? No. See, the setup was nice, but you forgot one particular thing. It goes actually a little bit something like this. As he stares up into the stands, he looks into the owner's box, and he screams, "Come on!" It's the owner's box, not the stands. The owner's box. So anyway,
my brain hurts.
Thank you so much for joining us.
That was one of the most awesome sound bites ever, man. That was a great segment. I always used to look forward to that when we were on our NFC West recess, man. And, the fact that we can sit here now and laugh about that from 2 years ago, it goes to show you how much fun we had when we were doing that show.
Oh, trust me, it will be coming back come football season. You can bet your sweet Bippy on that one, I'll tell you that much.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Turron.
Thanks a lot. You guys take care.
All right,
have a great night.
That was Turron Davenport from the Baltimore Times joining us this evening. Well, it was another amazing show for us tonight, and I got to tell you, that was a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, some speed talking, and, just thoughts coming from completely out of left field, and that's why we have the Mad Scientist Sports Lab.
Now, Nick, do you remember Micro Machines, the toys, back in, the 80s and 90s?
Yes, I do, actually.
You remember the motor mouth guy who just spoke, a mile a minute? I think our friend Mr. Christian could rival him.
What do you call? EJ may talk fast, but it's very clear and concise whenever he puts his thoughts into it, and that's why I love listening to his show, and that's why I love having him as a guest on our show. And I can't believe that it's been that long since I've had him. That was his first time in the lab, so glad to finally take that off my guest list, bucket list, as they would say. So with that,
and Nick, I was going to say, and Nick, we have a long bucket list, but that's probably because we have a dozen networks to work with.
And perfect segue, because I was about to say, we've come to the end of another show, but if you're not able to listen live right here on the Inscriber Digital Magazine Media Network, fear not, ladies and gentlemen, because this show is syndicated on the following networks as well. I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, led by Bobby Vellante. War Room Sports, led by John McMullen and B. Austin. Happy Hour Network, led by Lee Bowell and Ted Hicks. The Arena Sports Network, led by the Snowman, Brian Snow. Die Hard Sports Radio, led by Steve Itzkowitz. Sports for Fans, led by Sean Stewart. The Sports Crave, led by Noah Miller and Michael Guido. Nuts and Bolts Sports, led by Joe Cardozo. Late Night Sports Radio, led by Keith Grieve. The Asylum Sports Network, led by the Ricks, Gleager, and Briggs. And just signed today, ladies and gentlemen, Draft Utopia, led by Chris Ransom. Yes, you heard me right. Another network is syndicating this small little train that keeps on trucking along, known as the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. My name is Nick Piccarelli. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports. You can find me live on Twitter at NAF_inscriber. Again, that's NAF_inscriber. You can also listen to me on a few other sports shows as a guest. You know where to find me. I'm always available. Not in that sort of way, of course. But, when it comes to sports talk, you're listening to an award-nominated radio show. Drew, take us home.
Yeah, I was going to say that little train is choo-chooing all the way to the What a Fan Sports Finals. My name is Andrew Glukov. You can catch me on Twitter at StatBoyDrew. And Nick, we will be back at this again, doing the same song and dance that we have loved doing for so long. So send us home.
Next week, August 1st, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time, we will be back live on air right here on the Inscriber Media Network. Time to lower the beacons. Time to erase the chalkboard. It's time to get ready for some new test subjects. Ladies and gentlemen, in the words of the esteemed Professor Kyle Nash, class is dismissed. Until next week, the lab is officially closed. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.